everyone, welcome to the Art Workshop. My name is Christopher Epling. So glad you're able to join us today. We have a very special program in store for you. I hope you're ready. As you can tell by my attire here, it's Christmas or around that time of year. Winter is here in the mountains, and we're all so excited to be able to present a workshop today that's geared specifically towards a Christmas winter theme. So I hope you're ready. Hope you're ready to jump in and do some great tutorial here today, or at least participate with the fun tutorial. I won't say great. I'm not promising anything. You know me. But I would like to say this before we start. I'm so happy to announce that we do have a submission to come in, which we offer anyone out there who would like to submit artwork that we could share here on the channel. We'd love to share it. Highlighting local artists is really one of the biggest points of the show. That and trying to get you, the audience, engaged in creating your own work. So if you follow along with us here, do the tutorial and want to share that, awesome. If you have artwork that you've already created, such as Deborah Taylor, then you can submit that. Now, Deborah Taylor has submitted 2 pieces of work. They're both phenomenal. Here we have this artist who submits work that is just outstanding. I think probably my favorite of the 2 she submitted is the Pelican. I really like her use of the used wood to draw on. So great going. Thank you so much, Deborah, for submitting this. Now, you know me, I love talking about materials because materials are important. Growing up, I really didn't understand how artists used different materials together to make art with. You know, I just thought you have a brush and you have paint. But there's a lot of different ways you can really use materials to enhance your work and make you more proficient as an artist. So for today's materials, I'd like to go over those really fast. We have watercolor, and we're also using pencil today. So the watercolor that I brought in is, and you know there's different types of watercolor. You have cake watercolor, which is the little discs, and then you have tubes. You also have watercolor pencils, but I'm using the tubes today. Now this is a kit. We don't endorse any brands here at all, but I want to show you kind of what you can get fairly cheap. You can get a set like this, which is 48 different tubes. Of course, they're not in here, but the tubes are about, I'd say, what is this, 12 milliliters, so you get about almost a half an ounce of paint per tube. The colors we're going to be using today, of course, if you have watercolor at home and like to follow along, you can also use acrylic. We're going to be using red. We're going to be using 2 different blues, a light and dark blue. We're using, of course, white, 2 different browns, light and dark brown, and then orange and black. So that's the colors you need if you're able to follow at home. If you don't have these colors and would just like to draw along, you can. Of course, now I'm going to be also using a pencil to draw with. Before we ever start painting, I'm going to be, we have to sketch out what our drawing will be. I'm going to be using this basic little carbon stick here with a eraser. Now this is a automatic eraser that you push down, but you don't really need this. You can use one at the end of your pencil. Now the brushes, really fast to cover those. I'm going to be using a couple of different brushes. So these are known as rounded brushes, even though they don't look really round. The tips are usually round is what's meant by that. And then you have a flat brush. I'll be using 2 different sizes of these round tips, an 8 and a 12, and then also using this flat brush, which is about a medium. Now you may also, if you see me using this is a watercolor brush that has the water as a reservoir here. Instead of going and dipping and reapplying the ink, you can actually just use this brush and with a little bit of pressure get water out of it. All right, so the theme, of course, is going to be Christmas, the holidays, winter, and I thought we would do something we all could get behind here and work on maybe a snowman. I've already kind of marked out the area that I'm going to be working in. You can notice this is more like a landscape than it is a portrait. That means it's more wide than it is tall. Now you follow along with me step by step here, and the idea is we're going to draw the shapes on here first and then put color on, right? Whenever we work on creating these shapes, it's really important that you do it step by step with me so that you know exactly where to place your drawing, your lines, I mean, and you should be able to match mine pretty easy if you do that. The first thing we're going to do is start over here on the right-hand side, and we're going to draw a circle. Now draw lightly on your page. Don't push down really hard. The reason being is we're going to erase. Now notice where I'm placing this circle. It's off to the right a little bit. If it takes you a couple times going around and around to get the circle, it's okay. You should have at least the shape of a circle here. Now we're going to add a couple more elements to this, okay? The first element we're going to do is start right up here at the top of your circle and draw a line going across, cutting off the top portion of your circle. It's a line that kind of goes up towards the top right-hand corner a little bit. And then jump over here where you started your line, and you're going to draw a line coming up like that, and then another line going off towards the same area as the first line, okay? And once you have this, you should be close to almost the top of your page. So go ahead and bring a line coming up, connecting to wherever your page ends up here, okay? Now you notice how this circle overlaps with this rectangle shape we have? Well, that's where our eraser comes in handy now. I'm going to go in and get rid of the top portion of this circle. Erase it, get it out of there. No longer need it. Thank you for helping us, but we're done with you, right? All right, now let's jump down to the bottom portion of our circle here, and we're going to add a small element here. Watch what I'm going to do. This is a scarf, so we need it to look almost like a wave. See that? So I kind of brought a line coming out, back in, and back out. Now, let's bring this all the way down around the bottom of our circle here. So now you can see how this almost looks like the head of a snowman. Here is a hat or a toboggan, similar to what I'm wearing, I guess, and then a scarf coming down this way, okay? Now you're going to see a little bit of the second portion or the second circle making up the snowman's body here, okay? The arm will be coming up this direction. Now the arm, of course, is a stick. So once we get up to here, we're going to add a couple lines coming out from this line. So we have a line coming up, stopping, and then a line coming up. Let's seal that line off and bring it back down. So there's one little portion of that stick. Then you have the end of the stick here, like that. Let's put another little twig here, then bring it down, and one small one there. That'll make up our hand of our snowman. Down to the bottom. Now we're done. Now there's a few elements here I know, but as long as you have these two lines coming out from the snowman, you can add these fairly easy, okay? And we're going to work on the snowman's face next. Now this is one of the hardest portions of the activity for a lot of students I work with, because we're going to be working with perspective a little bit. Now perspective in art just means how do you see angles from a distance or a certain height, or from different observations of how things look in space, right? So imagine standing on a street corner and you're looking down at the end of the street. As far as your eye can see, all the buildings sort of get smaller as you get further away, right? We're not going to be doing too much perspective here, but the nose, the carrot, is at a certain angle. The easiest way to do this, really, is to go in here and draw a backwards letter C, right about there. Okay? And once you have your backwards letter C, it's pretty easy now to bring a line coming up this direction and a line coming down in this direction to form a carrot here. Okay? Like that. See? So you're working with just bringing two lines coming out from this backwards letter C, and then make a point. Need our eraser again. Get rid of that portion of that circle there. Maybe straighten this up a little bit more. There we go. Erasing is a very useful tool in art, because a lot of folks don't think of the eraser as being an actual tool that you draw with, but it absolutely is. Sometimes it's just as important what you take away from a drawing as what you add to it whenever you're trying to work with painting, okay? Now we need two dots for eyes, so we'll put one here, and we'll put another piece of coal here. All right, our snowman's starting to look more like a snowman, but we need to make a smile too, right? So we can form that smile using circles. Now, you can either start on either side you want and draw circles kind of going in a direction down towards the bottom and up, or you can draw a real faint line like this, because that'll help kind of show you where along this line you need to place some coal, see? Instead of having a smile kind of going all wonky in different directions. Now we're at that portion of the drawing now, or under drawing as we'll call it, what we add paint to, that we need to put a little bit of detail in here, okay? Now the first little bit of detail that I want to add, I want to put some stripes here on his little toboggan. And what's funny about the word toboggan, I didn't know that a lot of folks don't call these little hats toboggans. Toboggans actually, if you go towards Canada, I think it's a like a sled. But I was always told that this was your toboggan. Put on your toboggan. I'll never forget my grandma telling me that every single time I went outside in the winter. Or at least put something on your head, Chris, she would say. All right. So there we got some lines coming down the scarf. We have some lines coming down this portion of the hat. We're almost done, except for adding just a little bit of detail just below here. So the scarf, you know, is wrapping around the bottom of the head. We're going to have a little bit of portion of this scene here kind of coming down from this portion, okay? All right, so now we're ready to start adding paint. So hopefully you're able to follow along well to this point. Maybe the last thing I would do really fast before we move into paint is add a little bit of detail in the carrot, maybe a few lines coming up like this, kind of showing the ridges of the carrot, like that. And that's about it, okay? All right, here we go. Now I've already prepped my paint, but those tubes that I mentioned earlier are the tubes that you'll need, okay? Or at least the colors you need. If you don't have tubes of watercolor, that's fine, but you will need, though, these colors. I'm going to start off using this rounded brush, the larger one, get it wet. So get the tip of it nice and wet here. Now I do a lot of mixing, so I will pull a color and then just barely wash it off and then use another. Some artists will clean their brush out entirely. It's up to you, but I'm going to start out with this lighter blue. And all I want to do is get my brush nice and wet and then get some pigment on there. So, you know, not too much, and we're going to start out though in this top corner and move down towards our snowman, and we're going to put some color in here now. You're going to see that the color comes on pretty strong at first because you're just now introducing your brush to how it's going to be used for today. And how it's going to be used for today is with watercolor. Now the brush can be used with a lot of different things, right? Your brush could be used with oils, it could be used with acrylic, it could be used with ink even. And so your brush is like, well, what are we doing, right? Because they haven't been used in a while and it's a little bit rusty like I am. So getting it kind of, and yourself, ready for your work for the day may take a little bit of doing, but once you get the brush rolling, this portion shouldn't take you too long. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting this pigment down fairly heavy, and I'm bringing it down in back and forth motions towards the bottom right-hand corner of my drawing, okay? Back and forth. Now this is going to be what you see off in the distance, so we don't really need a lot of detail with this. We just need to get the paint on there, okay? Once you get down to about where your hand is, wherever that is on your drawing, we're going to take a step back for a second and we're going to change color. Okay, pulling it down a little bit more. Now, if you work on something at home and you're really eager to share it, and we hope you are, you can, of course, send that to us at pikeTV99@gmail.com, just like Deborah did, and we'd be more than happy on one of our shows coming up to share your work. Now, art for me has always been therapeutic. Art has always been a way for me to sit back and relax, unwind. Now with a 2-year-old, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But, however, I'm starting to find that she really likes art too, so we're starting to draw together. And let me tell you something, as a father, there's no other joy for me anyway in the world than to work with your child, showing them something that you love doing and seeing them get excited about it, whatever that might be. That's just, I love it. I lucked out that my joy wasn't maybe working or restoring on old cars, because it'd probably take a while before she even really would even be interested in that. Luckily, my interest is art, and all kids love art. So, all right, we have this light color blue coming down, back and forth motions. See how, notice I left some white in there you can see through? This is where we need to shift gears. We're going to shift gears and pull out some dark blue. I didn't clean my brush out thoroughly. I want a little bit of that light pigment to still be in there. It's okay for now. I'm starting at the opposite end now, where you started. So I'm not coloring over top of the snowman, but I'm going up towards that lighter blue at this point, okay? Now, honestly, this step right here probably takes up more time than anything that we're going to do today, to be honest. It's just because we have so much area to cover, and we have to, you know, get pigment on all this surface. The rest of the drawing is going to take less time. Now, you're probably already starting to wonder, how in the world are we going to show, you know, the white of the snow in the snowman? You know, why don't we just leave it white? Now, the obvious answer is, yeah, we use white paint, but we want to see a little bit of shadow. We'll do that in a little bit. Now, anybody out there fans of Disney and have watched the movie Frozen specifically, or even Bambi, which takes place in part, you know, in snow, you will see a lot of light blues, a lot of pinks, a lot of purple in the artwork. Now, the reason for that is, you know, in order to show, you want to get the mood of whatever it is that you're doing across to the viewer or whoever's looking at it. So what I mean by that is, if I'm doing a scene in wintertime, we want to use colors that reflect coldness. A lot of times we probably wouldn't imagine purple or pink to reflect cold, but it goes along the lines of water being blue, water being frozen. So we can get away with it. And we're going to do that in a little bit. Right after we finish up connecting this darker blue with the lighter blue. You can see already these back and forth motions that I'm making is starting to really have that cool effect of the paper showing through in certain areas. And that's the reason I'm doing the back and forth motions. I want the paper to pop out a little bit here and there. Now here we're getting ready to bridge these two colors. We've already sort of bridged the light blue and the dark blue here on the left. We're going to be moving up, bridging the rest of it. By bridging it, what I mean is you're crossing the colors over. Now, unlike Ghostbusters, where you never cross the streams, well, in this regard, we do want to cross our streams. We want to bring it all the way up, and you're going to go across and mix right into that color you started out with, okay? You're going to notice that it doesn't really blend exactly the way you want it at first. Now, if you use less pigment and more water, you're going to get the effect of a blended bridge here, okay? But there's another way to do it too. Let's say you started out and you've done like I've done over here on the left-hand side, and you've put more pigment than you probably wanted to. How you can get away with fixing that is when you go back across, usually the water takes a little bit of time to dry, especially if you're using watercolor paper, which is a really, really helpful tip if you're working with watercolor. But now we have this. We can either go back just with some water, reapply the water down onto that surface, and then pull it up towards the top. And usually that pigment will become moist again, and it'll actually move around. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to go ahead and wash your brush out a little bit, go back to that original blue you started out with, and then jump in here right where these two colors mix and put a little bit more down. You'll start to see that kind of helps to lessen that harsh blending, okay? Like that. All right, hopefully everybody's gotten to this point. I know we moved kind of fast. The good thing about it though is that you can always go to the YouTube channel. It's Pike TV 99 on YouTube, and all of these videos are there, archived for you, so you can go back, pause it, fast forward it, however you would like. Be sure and check out that collection. There's a bunch of videos on there that we've created over the years, and those are super resourceful tools there for you if you need to use them. Okay, that should be pretty good. Now I know I have a little bit darker area here, but that's fine. Down here, perfectly fine. Let's work on our snowman. We're going to start out first by going in and applying a little bit of red. So now I'm going to wash my brush out. If you tap it on the side of whatever it is you're mixing with, it helps to get excess water out. You can also have paper towel nearby. Notice I don't have any paper towel. This is one of those projects where you really don't need it, because as long as you get your brush cleaned out fairly well with the water, you want to keep your brush pretty moist. So it's okay if you don't just clean your brush out thoroughly in between every single application of a color, okay? Now let's work on these stripes here. What I want to do is I want to put some light red. So I'm using a lot of water, and I'm starting at the top here first. I'm just working on the top of every little section here, okay? Here. Now look how light that is. You can barely see it. And I'm using a lot. How you do that is use a lot of water and don't mix a whole lot of your watercolor in it yet, okay? We're just getting the tops. Do the same thing up here, just the top. Right there. A bit more here. And what we're going to do in a second, in order to make this nice and bright red, is we're going to put more pigment and less water. But we want the bottom portions of each one of these stripes to be darker than the top. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm probably going to jump over and use, after I've applied the red to the tops of each stripe, I'm going to use the smaller rounded brush now. Now this one hasn't been used yet, so I'm going to get it wet first. Jump over, pull some of my paint out. This time I'm going to try to use more pigment, and you're going to see how much brighter this looks. Now the reason that I did the tops light first, mixing up towards them like this, is that I like to show a little bit of shadow in here. Light. So this is a play on how the light reflects on surfaces, okay? So this is called value. So in art, when you're working with one color and you're working on variations of that color from light to dark, each one of those variations of that color is its value, okay? So this is a few different values of this one red. I better move this over here now. There we go. All right, we'll keep on going. A little bit more paint than that. Just the bottoms here. Going up to where you left off with your first application there, okay? Same thing at the top. Very bright. Now you notice that I'm using upward strokes here now. And what I'll do is when I go back over it in a second, I will mix those just by adding a little bit more water and pulling this color up. Darker red at the bottom, lighter red at the top. There we go. Now you can see this doesn't look quite right yet, but we're going to be able to adjust it in a second. Now once we get to actually showing a little bit of value with this snow, you're going to see us using a little bit of blue and maybe even some purple. I didn't mention purple at the beginning, but we may use some. And notice how we have two values of this red through every stripe. Now I want to clean my brush out in my water. All I'm going to do now is just with a wet brush, go in and pull up towards the top. It's okay if you go all the way up. That red that I first started out with, mixing with the darker value at the bottom. See that? Now what will happen when this dries, it should be a pretty even exchange from one value to the other, okay? You shouldn't see a real intense cutoff point where it goes from light to dark. It should blend fairly well. At the top, do the same thing. Bringing that up. See how that just once it gets wet again, it just mixes? Colors are so interesting to work with. And then of course, depending on what medium you're using, you get different effects by different types of applications. And by medium, of course, that just means what are you using to create the art with? Is it watercolor? Is it pencil? Is it paint? Is it acrylic paint, or oil paint? All right, there we go. Now you can see that exchange from light to dark. Now, let's work on the nose of our snowman. I'm pulling some orange now. Now what I'm going to do, pretty heavy application, start at the bottom and go all the way down. Just draw a line all the way down. Notice how as the brush runs out of water, it gets lighter. Wrap it underneath the bottom here. Okay, there we go. Now notice these grooves that I've drawn. Now you can play around with this a little bit here. What you can do is you can actually leave out where you have drawn those grooves like this. See that? And what we'll do is we'll put a lighter value of this orange in there. And it'll give the effect that maybe there's, you know, light hitting off of texture, okay? Hopefully anyway. Down to the bottom. If you need to get that line that you made wet again to pull up, you can. Again, up here at the top. There we go. All the way up here to the end. Like that. Now notice I've left out a lot of area here, right? This is where we just need to get our brush wet. You should have a little bit of pigment left in there. See that? I'm going to bring it all the way out to the end. And now I'm going to match, or combine, the top with the bottom. Just using water. You should have enough pigment on there that it'll actually pull up paint. See that? Very last thing we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of color in those grooves. There we go, all the way out here, back and forth, even up and down if you need to. Just make sure you mix it like that, okay? Now those grooves, what's what I'm going to do? I'm going to get fairly heavy, go down the edges of each one of those like this, see? Leave a little bit of white in there. There we go. All right, now we're going to go back and work with these areas a little more in a minute, but for right now, I want to use a little bit of black. Now this is where you really need to be careful. Use a lot of water in your brush, using the smaller rounded brush here. A lot of water. We don't want the coal to be solid black at the beginning. We want it to be almost a gray like this, see? Leave a little bit of white around the edge, because that white coming through is going to help us later. There we go. What I mean by that is just right around the main edge of these coal pieces. Just don't even worry about putting anything on it yet. I just realized something. I missed a little bit of red at the bottom where the scarf comes down across the snowman. We'll work on that in a second. Okay, last little bit of gray here. We'll let this dry really good, and then we'll come back over here in a second and we'll reapply some more paint. I'm going to wash my brush out fairly well. We'll grab a little bit of this red again because I definitely want to finish this off. So right across the bottom, this one stripe here, all the way across this time, and then use a little bit more pigment at the edge down here, get a little bit brighter, like that, towards the middle, okay? All right, well, we're moving along pretty good now. Now we are going to come back over this in a minute and fix a few things, but for now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the arm. Now I've used two browns here. I've washed my brush out really well. I think for this probably I'll use the larger brush again, so pull out your large rounded, and this is already, should be already fairly cleaned out. I'm going to get a little bit of light brown. I want to go ahead across the entire area with this light brown. It's okay to fill up every bit of the space here, just like a coloring book. Okay. Now with the tips up here, the fingers, down towards the hand. There we go. A bit more here. Down towards the fingers, the tips here going all the way to the hand. There we go. Now this light brown, we're going to be using a dark brown with it in a minute, and will help to show shadow. Sometimes it's easier to use a different color to get a variation of light to dark value of something than it is to just add more paint, right? Okay, before we work on the dark brown, I'm going to clean my brush out fairly well. Go back to my red. This time I want more pigment than I do water. So really get a good amount of pigment on here. We'll go up here to the hat, the top of the hat up here, see? And we're going to start over here at the edge and pull this color across the top. I forgot a couple areas here with my red. I'm having to go back, but we'll get there. There we go. See how dark that is compared to these lines? Now, before we go in and add any more detail to these colors we already have, what I want to do now is work with the shadow of the snow on the snowman. I want to clean my brush out really well. I don't want any of that red in there. So even if you have to wipe it off, you can. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this light blue that we started out with, very, very light blue. Not much at all. You want very little pigment in here, okay? And watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to go around the bottom of the hat here, around the bottom of the face, and around the side. And I'm going to put this light blue on the bottom of the hat, right there. We'll bring that down a little bit further. More color than you have paint. Remember, you don't need a lot. Let's go a little bit further down, like about right there. There we go. Now we're starting to show a little bit of shadow on this white surface. See that? With blue. Now you wouldn't probably think this would work, but it does. There we go, like that. On the bottom of the face here. And then, of course, add a little bit over here on the body. However far down your body goes at the end, bring that color down, just like we did up here. Let's put a little bit of this around the bottom of the carrot. This side of the carrot right there. And then you can add a little bit of blue around the edges for the coal. So like this. On the, you do this on the right hand of every piece of coal. Okay? Not all the way around it, just on the right, the bottom right, like that. Even the eyes get a little bit here, see? Now the reason we're not going all the way around the eyes and the mouth is that you can imagine that the light source is coming in from this direction, so the shadow is going to be on the opposite side of our light. So the light's coming in here, so all this shadow is on, as you see, the right-hand side, okay? May have a little bit of shadow down here underneath the scarf, like that, okay? There we go. Now, after we get to this point, we can start putting more detail in the color. This steps really don't take that long, but you can definitely make a lot of progress by taking one segment at a time. So let's start out with one color and add all the shadow we're going to do for that color first. The first one we'll work on is the hand, so the stick. So now I'm using a dark brown, and what you want to do is you want to go all around the opposite side of the light source. So if our light source is, of course, coming in from this direction, the shadow, or where we put the darker brown, is going to be all around the right-hand side, just like with the shadow on the body. See that? Now here we have a switcheroo, because what happens is these fingers on this side, the light's coming down, so the shadow is going to be the opposite side of the light source. So the way these are positioned makes it so that we have to put it on the opposite side. So going down this portion of the arm here, a little bit more, didn't really come off too dark there. There we go, that's it. You can see that sort of starts to look like wood now. You can put a few lines in here, like where the grains of wood, like that. Finger, just a couple, you don't need a whole lot. Something like that, see? Excellent. Now, using the same dark brown, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to go underneath the carrot now. I'm going to go all around the bottom of the carrot. This is where you start putting in that detail. Same dark brown. I'm making these little tiny upward dashes with my brush. See that ever so often? You don't need a whole lot of brown here. We just want enough to make that orange different at the bottom, okay? Like that, see? And we're good. Now notice how much brighter this appears, right? Because we're working from light to dark. Always work from light to dark. It's hard to go from dark to light when you're working with any sort of paint, okay? All right, so let's focus a little more now on the scarf. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to use my red again, but this time I want to really pull out a lot of pigment. So I'm using more paint than I am water. Now watch what I'm doing. I started on the opposite side of the light source, which is going to be on the right hand side here. And I brought a line coming down and then dark, dark, dark at the bottom. Upward motions with your brush will give that effect of there being almost like fabric. See? Let's go up and down with your brush. Down this side here, up and down. So the idea is by making one portion of each one of these little areas of our drawing darker, your eyes will start to see this as being shadow. Okay? That's the idea anyway. At the top, you'll do the same thing. Down very lightly, come all the way to the bottom, and go up, back and forth. And we're going to do this for every single line we have. All the way down here to the bottom, up and down. Seal it off at the bottom with a line there if you need to. Same thing here. Down, up and down. We have a couple more to do. We'll be almost finished with this portion. Now the only thing that really stays solid white on this drawing, or the painting, is going to be your scarf, because we used the blue here for our snowman. But we're going to add a couple of things though with the scarf with that white. We don't want to leave, the idea is even though you might have something solid white in a painting, don't just leave it bare that the paper makes the color. You want to put white in there. And we're going to follow those rules here with our drawing too, okay? I'm going to wash my brush out really good this time. And I'm going to grab now the black again. Now watch how dark. We're going to go real nice and solid here at the bottom of each one of these pieces of coal. See? Watch. Down here. Leave the gray. Don't go all the way to the top. Leave a little bit of gray. There we go, like that. And you're going to start to see now, this sort of looks like texture too. Because with that gray and that little sliver of white that you left, you're going to see that there is a little bit of texture appearing. And that's what we want. So you may want to dab it on, like I'm doing. By dabbing, I just mean tapping it, almost tapping your brush on the canvas or the paper, like that. Tapping here again. And here. All right, good. Now, our drawing's coming together pretty good, but we want to address this white sort of hanging out. I'm bring my flat brush now, this big old flat brush. I'm going to get this flat brush wet with some water. Now I have this area all the way around my drawing here that I'll come over and just maybe dab it on to pull some of that water out, because I don't want it soaking wet, but I want it to be wet. Okay? Now the white that we have, I'm going to pull some white on my brush. You can see about how much. It's a pretty good amount. Do a little test drive over here. Now we want this, when I apply this on here, it's going to be almost like a little bit of a gray effect to it. See, you can see when I do. Because watercolor, of course, you know, is not, the white of the watercolor pigment is not as bright and white as you think it is comparison to the paper. It's a little bit of a tone to it. Not much, but there's some there. You can really see it up here probably. Maybe not so much with the camera, but I can see it here in studio quite a bit. Wet again, white. This is where we're just going to go around putting a little bit of white pigment. Now you don't have to fill the entire face up with this, okay? In fact, you know, you can, leaving areas is perfectly fine. I like to leave areas when I'm working with watercolor completely bare, because I really just like the way that, you know, it looks when you have some paper coming through. You may not be that way, but if you want to, you can, but if you want to add pigment to every bit of it, you can do that too, okay? I'm going around the side of the face here. Now you probably can't really see the white that well, but it's on there. Here, okay, there we go. Go between these two right here. There we go. And put a little bit more here, body. And now we can address that scarf in a second too. So we have, of course, the scarf that is appearing really bright white compared to the face here, which has got more of a gray tone now. Now what we're going to do is use a little bit of blue, mix a little bit of blue in with that white. Not too much. But you're going to mix a little bit of white and a little bit of blue together. Test drive it if you need to. You can see about how blue that is. A little bit more water. There we go. Now the bottom of the scarves, all around the scarf here, I'm going to put a little line of this color. See that? Just a little dash. The bottom of the hat too. Like that. That'll just help kind of offset it a little bit, okay? You can even go as far as to put a little bit of white now. The top of the carrot here, back this way, light blue color. It's not coming up too well on the camera, but it's there. There we go. Now where it will come up really well on the camera is when we add snow. So the snowman is almost done. The black of the coal could probably be enhanced a little bit more with a little bit more pigment, but we're going to go back again to our large rounded brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just dab it once in the water, just a little bit. I dabbed it in the black, of course. That's great. We don't want black snow. That'd be kind of weird. There we go. That's better. And what I'm going to do, after I get it just wet enough, I'm going to pull a lot of white here. Now watch, I'm just going to get the tip of it coated in white, and I'm just going to dab it on here. Watch. Now if you need to put more or less, you can. You should start to see it popping up there. There we go. And the idea is we want to put dabs of this snow all along our snowman. You can even put some actually over in the drawing too. There we go. Maybe put a couple here and here. There, one or two on the hand. So you can see now the snow is everywhere. A couple more on this hat maybe here just to kind of offset it more. You can put a couple in the shadow areas like that. Okay. The idea is we want to see the snow everywhere, not just on the right or the left-hand side. We want to see it everywhere. Okay. All right, so we're almost done. The last thing we'll probably do here, if you wanted to go back in and maybe enhance it with an ink pen, you could. I like mine to be just sort of with pencil, that the paint represents the lines. But as you can see, you can do a nice winter wonderland scene with the snowman with relatively, minimal materials. So hopefully you've had a fun time drawing with us today with our snowman winter theme. If you did, please, we'd like to see it. Again, you can send your work into us at piketv99@gmail. Just like Deborah did, send your work along. If it's not a snowman, that's fine too. We'd like to see what you created and share it here on the show. So hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and continue to work on looking at these tutorials, all that YouTube resources that we have. You can find all sorts of stuff there, past winter-themed paintings as well, okay? Well, thank you all so much for allowing me to do this. It's an honor. And on behalf of myself and all of the staff here at Pike TV, I'd like to say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, and keep drawing.